In a world where respect often depends on appearance, one man decided to test what his empire had truly become. When a black billionaire walked into his own company dressed like a stranger, he never expected the humiliation that awaited him. But what came next changed every life in that. Subscribe to Simply Stories for more stories that'll open your eyes and touch your heart. The morning sun glimmered on the glass towers of Reeves Corporation, a structure that seemed to touch the clouds, just like the dreams of the man who built it. Jordan Reeves, a self-made billionaire, had started his empire with nothing but determination, integrity, and a vision to create opportunities for people from all walks of life. But on this particular morning, his reflection in those tall windows wasn't of a powerful CEO. He wore faded jeans, a gray hoodie, and carried a simple coffee cup. There was no expensive watch on his wrist, no security detail following behind, just a quiet man blending into the noise of the city he helped shape. Today, Jordan wasn't here to sign deals or address shareholders. He was here to test something much deeper: how his own employees treated those who didn't look important. As he approached the grand entrance, the automatic doors slid open with a soft hiss. The lobby was a picture of perfection, marble floors gleaming, modern art on every wall, and employees in crisp suits moving briskly from one place to another. No one looked at him twice. The receptionist at the front desk, a young woman named Clara, was tapping away on her phone, barely glancing up when he stepped forward. Her voice came out sharp and indifferent. "Sir, this area is for appointments only." Jordan gave a small, polite smile. "I understand. I just wanted to have a look around. I used to work here a long time ago." His tone was calm, gentle, but it didn't soften her expression. Clara finally looked up, her eyes sweeping over his hoodie and worn shoes. "That's not how this works," she said flatly. "If you're not on the list, you can't be here. You'll need to leave." Before Jordan could say another word, a tall, broad-shouldered security guard walked over. His name tag read, Rick. His posture was rigid, his expression impatient. "Sir, you heard her," Rick said firmly. "You can't just wander around this floor. Let's go." He gestured toward the door with a tilt of his head. Jordan's eyes moved slowly around the lobby, absorbing every detail: the grand chandelier, the sculptures he'd chosen himself, the portrait of him that hung proudly near the elevators. Ironically, the man in the picture was being escorted out of the very place that celebrated him. The corners of his lips curved into a faint smile, though his chest felt heavy. He nodded once, still calm. "No problem," he murmured. As he turned to leave, a young intern carrying a folder hurried past. Her name was Grace. She nearly bumped into him, apologizing softly before their eyes met. There was something in the way he held himself, something about his calm presence that made her hesitate. She opened her mouth to ask if he needed help, but Rick's firm grip on the door ended the moment. "Let's move it along," the guard muttered, pushing the door open for him. The city air hit Jordan's face as he stepped outside. For a moment, he stood still on the sidewalk, surrounded by rushing traffic and strangers passing by. Then he looked up at the building, his building. The gold letters above the entrance gleamed in the sunlight. Reeves Corporation. His name, his legacy, yet inside, he had been treated like an intruder. He exhaled slowly and whispered to himself, "Let's see how deep this blindness goes." He walked away without looking back, blending once more into the rhythm of the city. But his absence would soon become the most important presence that building had ever known. Inside, Clara leaned back in her chair, rolling her eyes. "Can you believe that guy?" she said, smirking. "He said he used to work here. Looked more like he couldn't afford the cleaning crew." Rick chuckled beside her, the kind of laugh that comes from arrogance rather than humor. "Yeah, probably some washed-up guy looking for free coffee." Their voices carried to the office hallway, where Mr. Dalton, the operations manager, stepped out of the elevator. He was the kind of man who wore pride like cologne, strong, thick, and suffocating. "What's going on here?" he asked, his tone as polished as his shoes. Clara quickly explained, finding amusement in retelling the story. "Just some random guy tried to walk in, said he used to work here. Rick had to escort him out. Dalton smirked. "People these days will do anything to get close to power," he said. He didn't realize that power had already stood before them, quiet and humble. The man they'd mocked was not a desperate stranger seeking attention, but the founder of everything they touched, the walls they leaned against, the paychecks they signed, the brand they proudly represented. As the laughter faded, the camera of life was still rolling, capturing not just their words, but their character. Because respect is tested when no one's watching, and humility is proven when power is disguised. That morning, Reeves Corporation had failed both tests miserably. But the real lesson was just beginning. The next morning, the air on the top floor of Reeves Corporation was heavy with unease. The employees sensed something important was about to happen. Mr. Dalton, the operations manager, had called an emergency meeting for all department heads. His message had been vague. Something about a surprise visit from an important investor. But whispers had already begun to circulate. Some said the founder himself, the elusive Jordan Reeves, was coming in person. No one had seen him in months, and the uncertainty made even the most confident executives restless. Clara sat behind her desk at the reception of the executive floor, adjusting her blazer again and again. The memory of the man she had turned away yesterday haunted her like a shadow she couldn't shake. She had laughed about it then, but now her chest felt tight with regret. Something inside her whispered that she had made a mistake far greater than she realized. Rick, standing near the hallway, leaned casually against the wall, pretending not to care. But his usual smug grin was gone. Every time the elevator chimed, his heart skipped a beat. Grace sat quietly near the meeting room, clutching a notepad to steady her hands. She hadn't told anyone, but she couldn't stop thinking about that man's calm voice, the way he looked at the building before leaving. There was something commanding about him, something that didn't fit the image of an ordinary visitor. The digital clock on the wall ticked toward 9. The elevator doors opened again, and this time, the sound of polished shoes echoed through the corridor. Every head turned, and there he was. The same man from yesterday, but transformed. Gone was the gray hoodie and coffee cup. Now he stood tall in a navy blue tailored suit that fit him like it was made for his confidence. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. His face was calm, his stride measured, his eyes steady with quiet authority. Behind him walked 2 legal advisors and a handful of reporters, cameras ready but respectful, waiting for a moment to capture history. For a second, no one moved. Clara froze completely, her eyes wide with disbelief. Rick's jaw fell open and the color drained from his face. Mr. Dalton's composure broke for a split second before he forced a smile and hurried forward. "Mr. Reeves!" "What a surprise, sir. We weren't expecting—" Jordan raised his hand slightly, and Dalton's words died in his throat. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jordan's voice, deep and even, broke it. "I believe some of your staff already met me yesterday." The words cut through the air like glass shattering. Clara's trembling fingers gripped the edge of her desk. "It was you?" she whispered, barely audible. Jordan's gaze met hers. Not angry, not cruel, but piercing. "Yes, Clara," he said calmly. "It was me. The man you told to leave his own company." The room went still. Even the reporters paused, sensing the gravity of the moment. Dalton tried to recover, stammering, "Sir, they didn't know. It was a misunderstanding." Jordan turned toward him, his expression unreadable. "They didn't need to know," he replied softly. Respect shouldn't depend on recognition. Every eye in the room fell to the floor. The echo of his words filled the space, and for a moment no one dared breathe. The clicking of a camera broke the silence, but even that sound felt out of place, like an intrusion on something sacred. Jordan took a slow step forward, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the people he had once trusted to carry his vision. The men and women in that room had once been inspired by him, but somewhere along the way they had become protectors of status instead of purpose. He turned toward the wide glass window that overlooked the city. "I built this company to give people a chance, to create a place where hard work mattered more than appearance," he said, his tone low but steady. "But it seems I failed to protect that dream." Dalton's mouth opened, then closed. There was no excuse big enough to fill that silence. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Rick swallowed hard, his posture shrinking with guilt. Grace, who had been silent all this time, finally found the courage to speak. "Sir," she said softly, her voice trembling, "I tried to tell them yesterday." But they wouldn't listen. Jordan turned to her with a faint smile that carried both gratitude and understanding. "I know," he said gently, "and that's why you'll help me fix it." The simplicity of those words struck everyone in the room. There was no anger, no threat, just quiet purpose. It was the kind of calm that only true power carried, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. He walked slowly toward the head of the table and placed his hand on it, the same table where his company's greatest decisions had been made. "What defines this place," he said, glancing at Dalton and then Clara, "isn't the profits or the prestige, it's the people. And if the people forget to see the humanity in others, then this building means nothing." The city skyline stretched out behind him, tall and indifferent, but inside that room, hearts began to shift. Clara wiped her tears quietly. Rick lowered his head, ashamed. Dalton stood frozen, realizing that for all his titles and influence, he had just been schooled by a man who needed none. Jordan turned away from them, looking once more out the window. His reflection glimmered against the glass, steady, resolute. The silence in the room deepened, not with fear but with realization. The man they had dismissed had returned not as a stranger, but as a mirror reflecting their true selves. Power had walked back into Reeves Corporation, not to punish, not to humiliate, but to redeem what arrogance had broken. That afternoon, the atmosphere inside the grand corporate hall was thick with unease. Word had spread like wildfire that the mysterious visitor from yesterday, the man Clara had asked to leave, was none other than Jordan Reeves, the billionaire founder of the entire empire. Employees whispered in clusters, exchanging anxious glances. No one could believe the man they had dismissed as an outsider was actually the reason any of them even had a job. Clara sat near the front, her hands trembling as she gripped her notebook. Rick stood a few rows behind, trying to hide in the crowd, while Grace stayed silent, her expression calm but expectant. She knew this was about to be more than a company meeting. It was going to be a reckoning. Then, as the doors opened, the room fell dead silent. Jordan Reeves stepped onto the stage, his presence commanding without effort. He wasn't smiling, nor did he look angry. He looked thoughtful, collected, and resolute. The sound of his footsteps alone seemed to echo through every corner of the hall. Cameras from the company's media department were already rolling, and the employees held their breath. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a deep calm that instantly demanded attention. "I walked into this building yesterday," he began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "The same building I built with my own hands and heart, and I was told to leave. Not because I broke a rule, not because I caused trouble, but because of how I looked." His words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples of guilt and reflection. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. Rick stared down at the floor, unable to meet his gaze. Jordan let the silence linger before he continued. "What hurts most isn't what happened to me. It's what it says about us, about what we've become." He looked at the logo of his company on the wall behind him, his own creation that once symbolized hope and equality. "When I started this company, I wanted to build a place where talent was recognized beyond appearances, where people didn't have to fit a mold to belong. But yesterday I saw that we've lost that vision." A murmur spread through the audience. Some employees looked ashamed. Others nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. Jordan then turned his attention to the executives seated in the front row. "Many of you wear your titles with pride," he said, "but respect isn't earned by the size of your office or the shine of your shoes. Respect is tested when no one's watching, when you're faced with someone who can do nothing for you." He let the words hang in the air, heavy and honest. "That," he said firmly, "is where true character is revealed." Clara covered her mouth, fighting back tears. Rick's usually smug expression was gone. He looked like a man realizing his reflection for the first time. Jordan walked slowly to the edge of the stage. "I'm not here to fire anyone," he said, his voice softer now but still steady. "Because firing only teaches fear. Fear can make you obey rules, but it can't make you change your heart. Learning can." Gasps and whispers rippled through the hall. People expected punishment, not mercy. Jordan smiled faintly, almost sadly. "Starting tomorrow, every single person who works in this company, from the highest executive to the newest intern, from the boardroom to the janitor's closet, will attend a training program on empathy, equality, and human understanding. Not because it looks good for the brand, but because it's the only way we move forward." The hall remained silent for a long moment, and then, slowly, a few people began to clap. Others joined. Soon the applause filled the entire room. Some clapped out of admiration, others out of relief, but everyone felt something shift inside them. Grace, standing near the front, felt her eyes sting with pride. For the first time in years, she saw real leadership, not one built on authority, but on humanity. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara hesitated. Her feet felt heavy as she approached the stage where Jordan still stood, talking quietly with one of his advisors. When he turned and saw her, she froze. Her voice trembled. "Sir," she whispered, "I don't know how to apologize. I was blind, truly blind." Jordan looked at her kindly, his expression softening. He rested a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then see better from now on," he said simply. There was no anger, no bitterness, just truth. Clara nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. For her, those few words were more powerful than any reprimand. Rick approached moments later, his voice low. "Sir, I don't have an excuse. I just hope I get the chance to prove I've learned something." Jordan nodded again, turning back toward the window where the city skyline shimmered in the afternoon light. "Change doesn't start in policy," he said quietly, mostly to himself. "It starts in people." As the last few employees exited the hall, Grace stayed behind, watching him in silence. Jordan finally turned, offering her a knowing smile. "You believed in the right thing when no one else did," he said. "Keep doing that. It's how real change lasts." And as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, the once proud company that had momentarily lost its soul found its way back, not through wealth, not through punishment, but through humility and the power of respect. Weeks drifted by, and the air inside Reeves Corporation slowly began to feel different. The walls that once echoed with silent judgment now carried the hum of genuine respect. People smiled more, not out of politeness, but out of recognition. Every morning, the front desk that had once turned away a billionaire in plain clothes now welcomed every visitor with warmth, no matter what they wore or who they appeared to be. It wasn't a forced courtesy. It was real change, born out of reflection. The company that had once prized appearances now celebrated values. Clara, who had once been quick to judge, transformed the most. She threw herself into every training session, listening, learning, and sharing her own mistakes as lessons for others. It wasn't easy for her. Confronting her own prejudice never was, but she did it anyway. Over time, she became one of the most vocal advocates for equality in the workplace, often staying late to help draft new company policies centered around fairness and inclusion. Her old arrogance had turned into empathy, her tone softer, her smile more genuine. Rick changed too. Gone was the cocky attitude, the dismissive glances. He volunteered to lead the new community outreach initiative that Jordan had established, programs that gave underprivileged youth access to internships, mentorships, and opportunities inside Reeves Corporation. For the first time, Rick understood the weight of what it meant to use power for good. People began to notice his sincerity, and while his past behavior wasn't forgotten, his effort to be better earned him a second chance. Grace, meanwhile, had quietly become one of the pillars of the company's new foundation. Her calm voice and strong sense of fairness didn't go unnoticed. Jordan saw in her what true leadership looked like: compassion without weakness, strength without arrogance. When he promoted her to his executive assistant, there was no ceremony, no announcement, just a quiet acknowledgement of her character. She hadn't spoken much during the chaos, but she had seen what others couldn't, humanity even in disguise. One rainy evening, the office lights glowed softly against the dark sky. Most employees had gone home, but Jordan remained in his office, standing by the tall glass window that overlooked the city he had helped build. Raindrops streaked down the glass like thin silver lines, distorting the city lights into blurred halos. He stood silently, hands in his pockets, lost in thought. When Grace entered with a gentle smile, the soft sound of her footsteps pulled him back to the present. "It's different now, isn't it?" she asked quietly. Jordan turned slightly, his reflection faint in the glass. "Yes," he said after a pause, "but change doesn't start in buildings, Grace. It starts in hearts." Her smile deepened and she nodded in agreement. "And sometimes," she said softly, "it takes a storm to remind people what light looks like." Downstairs, life continued in small, meaningful ways. Clara stood by the reception desk, guiding a delivery man who seemed lost. Her tone was kind, patient, worlds away from the dismissive way she had once treated people she thought beneath her. A few steps away, Rick held the door open for an elderly janitor carrying a heavy cart of cleaning supplies. The old man smiled and nodded gratefully. Rick returned the smile, not out of guilt, but out of respect. The transformation wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and real. Jordan eventually closed the file on his desk and prepared to leave. He walked through the hallway, greeting a few late-working employees who now looked at him not with fear but admiration. As he reached the lobby, Clara looked up from her desk, slightly startled to see him so late. For a moment, her old nervousness returned, but when Jordan smiled, she found her voice. "Good night, Mr. Reeves," she said softly. He stopped and turned to her, his smile warm but thoughtful. "Good night, Clara," he replied. "And thank you for learning," she blinked rapidly, touched by his words. It wasn't forgiveness she had expected. It was grace, and somehow it felt even heavier. When Jordan stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind the faint scent of wet pavement. The cool night air brushed against his face as he looked up at the towering building that bore his name. The golden letters, Reeves Corporation, gleamed under the streetlights, bright against the night sky. For the first time in a long while, Jordan felt peace, not pride, not triumph, but peace. He had walked into this building as a stranger, judged by his own creation, and had walked out leaving something greater than an empire. He paused for a moment, his reflection faintly visible in the glass doors behind him, and the narrator's voice seemed to whisper through the still air. He walked into his empire as a stranger and walked out leaving a legacy. Because true power isn't proven by wealth or fear, it's proven by grace, humility, and the courage to forgive. As Jordan walked toward his car, the city lights shimmered around him, reflecting off the puddles like small fragments of gold. Behind him, his company glowed like a symbol, not of success, but of rebirth. The world would remember his story not as a tale of money or revenge, but as proof that one man's dignity can rebuild what arrogance tried to destroy. And in that quiet, rainy night, the legacy of character lived on, strong, eternal, and unshaken.